Welcome back to the Gamers Hall. I'm Chris.
And I'm Adam.
And today we're going to talk about DM burnout.
Mostly we're talking just about the DM. We're not talking about the player because we feel the DM is probably the most important role at the table. So exactly, what is DM burnout? Well, DM burnout is when the DM no longer wants to run the campaign or even play the game.
And this is something that happens a lot. And the reason we're focusing on DMs and not players is because you can have 6 players, but no one wants to DM. So then you can't play.
Yeah. We feel this might help people out there understand because nobody really talks about DM burnout. It is important, and it's happened to many of us, and I've seen many people just get sick of it. So hopefully we'll shed some light on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure and things that come with being a DM. So, let's get into some of that.
Yep, let's get it.
All right, so what causes a DM to burn out?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually kind of a long list.
Yeah, and these are burdens that generally the DM is the one shouldering through the entire campaign. Players may take some of these back and forth, but this is generally only the DM doing this unless he delegates it or a player steps up and does that for him or her.
Yeah, but most of the time I've only typically ever seen DM responsibilities.
Right.
And like one of them is prep work, world building, NPCs, everything that the players are going to deal with when playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. And this is just coming up with the idea of what you want, where you're going to be at, what's in this place. It's populating the world for the story to start, which every DM has to do at the beginning of every session. They have to understand what is here in this world for the players to be a part of.
Yeah, and there are things out there to make it a little easier on the DM. You can buy campaign settings where someone's already done all the work, but the DM still has to read it and has to figure out NPCs and the personalities for those NPCs, and there's still a little bit of world building that they have to do, even though the foundation has been laid out.
Yeah, it could be map drawing, could just be
You
gathering, different things and different ideas in order to make it work.
What quest? What are they doing? Yeah, like what happens when the players go left? Like now you have to improv a new quest. I mean, all stuff for the DM. But speaking of the quest and everything, incorporating the player characters into the setting.
And this is a big one because really, and it's separate from world building and all that because players are going to make whatever characters they want. You can suggest, hey, I would like you to play this. But then you'll sometimes have a player that plays something so off the wall. Like, how do I make a guy that is a pirate make sense in a desert that is 300 miles away from any ocean? Why does this guy happen to be here? That's pretty hard for the DM to constantly have to take that into account because that is a whole nother story line or arc that could happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, but also, like, let's just look at the warlocks in general. A lot of people multi-class into warlock. Well, how did that happen? Who is your patron?
Yeah.
How do we fit that into the story? What's the development of that? Like, now the DM has to kind of figure that stuff out and sit down and talk with the player.
And I mean, it could be just as bad for clerics and paladins on that same line of thinking. Is your deity that important to you? Is it important to this campaign? Is it going to push this campaign?
Yeah.
And their backstories, it matters too.
Yeah.
Is this guy a thief?
Yeah, and physically tying them to the world.
Yeah.
And like, what's your history? What's your past? How does it make it to the present that the players are playing in? And how is that going to be relevant towards the future of their play? It's all something the DM typically has to do and figure out.
Yeah.
And then, speaking of PCs, what's one of the important elements of Dungeons and Dragons? Combat.
Yeah, combat is a big deal because the DM is the one running combat. Players are just a single model inside combat, or maybe two if they're running a pet of some sort, or they've decided that they would help with an NPC that is playing there with basic information or whatever. But the DM is still the one making the decisions for what that NPC is going to do. They're also deciding the tactical situation they're in, deciding what the monsters may or may not do. So he has to understand what is their mind frame when creating any of their decisions, because let's face it, not everything acts the same way. You, as a DM, you try to create combat that's not a blank white room in a box and say, go. You want it to feel natural and be fun. So that's a lot of thought that goes into that.
Yeah, and a lot of times players give a lot of pushback when DMs run combats and creatures a certain way. Like, oh, suddenly gonna double tap the guy on the ground. Oh, well, why would they do that? It's like,
and then you have to explain. You know, why do you need it? You know, as a DM, you think, why do I need to explain? This is what happened.
Yeah, like, you know, you guys can just figure it out later because maybe there's a grand scheme behind it, but the players aren't thinking that. They're thinking right here and now.
Yeah, and then, you know, spells that can be used. How does that affect the terrain? Weather conditions. What does that actually mean for players' actions in combat? How does combat affect the story afterwards? Because, you know, combat, depending on what they kill or what they don't kill, could mean completely different paths in a campaign.
Yeah, but I mean, speaking of using all the spells and player abilities, I mean, the DM also is the arbiter of the rules.
Yeah, that's another big point. A DM has the burden, and the DM has to do this. The DM has to know the rules of the game. They may not know all the rules, but they have to do it.
And you might not get them right, and there's certain things you might not like, and the DM is going to change, and the DM is going to rule, like, this is how I'm playing it.
No. But it's important that they know it. And then it's also important that they enforce those rules, which means that, you know, players are not going to necessarily like it a lot of times. But
yeah,
that's a lot to read.
Yeah.
And to know.
I mean, yeah, like, ever since 5th edition first came out, there's still rules that we're even finding out today that we've been playing wrong because we played older editions. And now it's like, I mean, I just recently figured out that we were playing Fireball wrong and Lightning Bolt and stuff. And it's like, wow, we've been doing this for 5-6 years now, or actually no, like 8-9 years.
8 years now.
And like we've been playing that one thing wrong, and like we still get a bunch of stuff wrong. So you're gonna get stuff wrong. Be easy on them about it, because
they're trying to make it function within the rule set.
Yeah.
Another big thing is time management, because you have to say, we're going to start at this time, we're going to end at this time. So now they have to keep a running clock in their head, or actually physically watch the clock and say, okay, I need to get this done at this time, this done at this time, this done at this time. That does not always work out, especially even in our campaign we did last night. We as the players messed around in an area for way too long than we should have, because we found it interesting. And for Chris, that's a burden, because he wants to move the campaign along. He had things planned out that he's not going to get to, but he can't necessarily force that, because that's what players do. But he has to manage that now, and see how far we get, because, you know, not all of us want to play 7, 8, 10 hours. You know, we can't.
Not all of us can play that long.
Yeah, some of us.
A lot of us want to. A lot of us can't.
Right, but time management is a major burden for the DM.
But one thing that kind of ties all these things in together, you know, the combat, the world building, and you know, just the players in general, is materials.
Yes, you have to buy a book. You have to buy models. Usually, you need to buy
the players.
digitals.
The players are typically going to buy a player's handbook, maybe player supplements. The DM is buying the core books, campaign settings, maybe some modules, miniatures, maps, terrain, all kinds of stuff.
Notebooks to put their notes in. They're buying it digitally, not just that. So maybe they'll have a copy digitally of the Dungeon Master Guide, and they'll have one physically for use later.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. Right? I mean,
yeah, I've spent so much money on just DM stuff. Like, I mean, I recently just bought a castle for literally one session. Entire castle, $100 some for one session. But granted, I can use it for more sessions. Yeah. But still, for one session, and that's just one thing.
Yeah, players aren't doing that. I mean, they may be nice enough and hand something to the DM, say, "Hey, I got this. You can use it," which is fantastic. Most time, no player is thinking of that. What they're thinking of is, "Hey, I need my model, and what I need is my papers and my notebook. So I'll keep up with what I want to know," but that's it. Yeah. Everything else is purely DM burden. That is all the stuff that they have to buy.
Yeah. Man, I hope the DM has a gridded map for us.
Yeah, and that may or may not be. I don't think that's usually necessarily fair for the DM to have to shoulder much of that, because they're only one part of this game. So hopefully people are a little more fair.
But why would a DM buy all these materials and all this stuff? To help keep the players engaged.
Yes.
When players actually physically see stuff, they become more engaged. So DM's responsibility is to keep the players engaged, to keep the story going and flowing, so there's not it's not you guys just sitting around making a lot of jokes. Granted, when you play D&D, that's going to happen, but you also want to play the game too.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants to show up to a session and joke around for 3 hours and play one.
Right. Yeah. You as a DM, you want them getting into the game and being completely just in there with their player or with their characters, actually doing things in there, fighting, talking, building. Exploring, learning what is around there. You have to give them things that are going to do that, and you have to usually tailor that to each individual PC, because most players are not all on the same page with each other. They might all be going in the same direction, but they're all doing it for different reasons. They're not necessarily, looking at the situation the same. So what is fun for one person is not fun for another, and they might check out. But one way to keep players engaged is lore. And this is lore that the players are making, and this is lore that is already in the setting. And this is another point for a burden the DMs have to take up, is they have to know. You just have to know that, oh yeah, if they go in that direction, they're going to run into a cave that a red dragon's been there forever, right? Or they have to know that a player in session 2 happened to meet somebody specific, and it's going to matter in session 10, but they don't know they did that. But now I have to keep up with the fact they did it, and that is lore. What did they do to this person? And this person knows. This is now history for them.
What's the name of this tavern? Who runs the tavern? What's the personality of that tavern keeper? Does that tavern keeper have family? Yeah. And just
what happened 50 years ago in this tavern? Was there a war right here? Did certain people die here? Have adventurers come through this before? Yeah. And that's just one spot. But that is knowledge that a DM has to know in order to keep the players there.
Yeah. Now, granted, most of your players don't care about the world you built and don't care about the lore that went into it, but at the same time, they do become a little discerned or unengaged when they ask these questions and you don't have an answer.
Yeah. The worst thing you can usually say to a player at any given instance is, I don't know.
I didn't think that far.
Yeah. I mean, that is a quick stop to a campaign. It has happened to you and me for sure while running a campaign. A player asked something and we never thought about it. Never once. And you're like, and then it grinds to a halt.
Yeah, and it's going to happen. Sometimes you have to stop and figure something out. Just try to make it take a short time. But it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And here's something that DMs have to deal with, but it's a burden on them because as DMs you don't typically want to tell your players no.
Right.
But sometimes the DM has to control the meta knowledge that a player knows compared to what their characters know in game.
Right.
Because you may be playing in the Forgotten Realms. Well, you've got a player who has read 50-plus books on the Forgotten Realms and knows a bunch of lore and other stuff that you don't know, even though you're the one running this campaign setting. And it's like, oh, yeah, well, if we're at Waterdeep, we can go 7 clicks west and 3 clicks south, and there's a secret cave in there with a bunch of magic items that actually has, the magic item wave. And it's like, sorry, bro, you may know that, but your character does not.
Yeah, or you know how to make glue. Character doesn't know that. Just because you know how to make glue doesn't mean your character's ever taken the time to figure that out. And this boils down to players knowing what lore is, players knowing history, or players knowing things that can actually work. Like scientific things, like if you mix this, you mix that. That doesn't mean the characters know. That also works in the other way too, where players might not know something, but the characters would. So maybe a lack of meta knowledge in some instances also hampers, where a player goes, look, I have no idea what that is. My character definitely does. How do I figure out what that is?
And then the DM has to figure out what to do to suit that.
Yeah, and that's mostly it goes the other direction where they know more than they're supposed to, right? But there is instances.
I was watching this movie and this guy did this and he gathered animal fat and created this little miniature firebomb, and I want to do that. How would your character know about that?
Yeah.
You as a person know about that, but
or
your character doesn't.
The first time they meet an orc, he's not attacking, but because they've played before, they think all orcs are evil. Everything we've ever seen is an orc is evil. It's going to attack. But yet this orc is carrying a bushel of apples to his house. Does he look evil? Why are you attacking this orc? Well, they're evil. It's like, you don't know that. You can't use that outside knowledge to justify what your action is. I mean, you're going to, and now we have to play off of that.
Yeah, and this is one of our last points, but it's kind of a big point.
Yeah. Is
being a forever DM and never being able to play as a player.
Yeah, that hurts. Some people love DMing, and that's all they want to do. But
some people want that responsibility of all of this stuff, all this knowledge off, and they just want to be able to show up and just play and have somebody else run, even if it's for a week or 2 or a month. Like, listen, I need a break. Somebody just let me play. Let me be a player. Yeah. I want to make the arcane archer. I want to make a wizard that's throwing fireballs and lightning bolts.
Yeah. I just want to have one train of thought where all I have to think about is what this one thing does. I don't want to have to think about the displacer beast in the freaking forest. I don't want to have to think about what the king's doing over here. I want to think about what Arnold the Barbarian is doing right now. That's it. I want to play.
And bash anyone's face in it, calls him football head.
Yeah. And, I mean, that can be a serious burden on the DM when they are just stuck doing all this work. I mean, this incorporates all of it. I mean, sometimes the DM just wants to stop and be the player.
Yeah. Look, let somebody else take over for a little bit, because being a player is fun. Being the one that chooses where the story is going to go, what's going to happen, and having that what if, and not having to decide like, oh, well, because the DM has to react to what the players are acting to.
Yeah, and they get to have that surprise, that wonderment of like, oh man, I didn't know that's going to happen. As a DM, you generally don't get that. You get the sense of dread when a player surprises you with something, but you're not like, oh, that's amazing. You're generally going, oh no.
Oh no, I didn't have this city built out. I don't know nothing about that. And you guys are going there today?
Yeah, but as a player, that just all goes away.
Right, and these are all things that are going to cause a DM to burn out.
Yeah, and it could be a few of them that are really stick with the DM and bother them, or it could be all of them, or it could just be one single one that just is constantly nagging at them. Like, they don't mind prep work, they don't mind buying stuff, they don't mind being the lore keeper. They read all these books anyway. That's fine, but they really want to be a player, and because they can't be a player, they're like, I'm done. Or it could just be a collection of all of it, and it's just too much, and they decide, look, I don't feel like playing anymore. I'm done playing the game. I am completely overloaded.
Yeah. And so let's get into our next point of how can we prevent this?
Yeah. So we'll get into some of the ways to prevent. One of the first ways to prevent, and one of the easiest ways of preventing DM burnout, is let the DM be a player.
Yeah,
it's the first burden. Now it's the first way to prevent.
Yeah, it's somebody else take over the DM responsibilities. Whether it's a one shot, 2 shot,
short campaign for a month.
Short campaign for a month. I mean,
or going back and forth between campaign. You do X amount of time, I do X amount of time. You do X amount of time, I do X amount of time. Going just back and forth.
Yeah. But, I mean, we know not everybody wants to be a DM.
Yeah.
But, honestly, I think everybody should at least do a one shot.
Yeah. Just understand what it takes. And that goes a long way for helping people when they DM. Once somebody else knows what you're going through, and they done it, now when they become the player again, they can go, I'm not going to bother him that much about the fact that goblin did that. And it's not that big of a deal.
I know he put time in this, so I'm going to push towards going towards this quest. He threw a hook, like, let's take it.
Yeah. It's, I get it now. And that's what letting the DM be the player is really going to help. It's just other people understanding what you do, what you go through, in order to make sure they have fun.
And then another one of the things you can do is help remind the DM of the time. Like, let's say you guys are sitting down for a 4-hour session. Remind them like, hey, it's 8 o'clock. We're 2 hours in. Just a simple reminder of the time. So it's like, okay, I need to get it together.
Yeah. Or just or if the other players are taking too long, like, hey, guys, he's wanting to move on, so let's move on. Whatever else in here is not that important. Let's go. Let's do some other stuff, or just that. Basically, you're simple. Like, it's 9, it's 10, it's 11, it's 12. Just could be as simple as that, and the DM knows. Okay, just need to keep going. And they don't have to think about that.
Yeah, and also it helps them let them know, like okay, so they're getting close to this. I can go ahead and wrap up at this point.
Yeah. And also make sure that the players understand that they need to do things too. They need to push the story along. They need to quit messing around with this one thing, even though it might be funny and it might be something they care about. But that doesn't mean it's good for the story. So if a player is managing the time as well, then 2 people are now in understanding that we need to get going. We need to do something.
Yeah. And another thing is, because we mentioned about how the DM buys everything, start a group fund.
Yeah.
Like, everybody just pitch in $5, and it literally goes towards more D&D stuff, more game stuff, more material for the group to play with.
Yeah. I mean, some people might not be really feel safe about just a group of people using money, because you don't know if you're going to play with the same people or not. But I mean, it can be as simple as, hey, I know you want to get this next book. I know you're going to do it. Here's $10 towards it. You get to keep it. I don't want it. I just want to be able to play with what you're going to do in this book. So here's $10 for it.
Yeah. If there's a campaign setting or a module, like, hey, here's the module. Yeah. Here's Curse of Strahd. We really want to play Curse of Strahd.
Yeah, can you run that for us? And now they don't have to worry about buying it. They don't have to worry about how much that cost. Or simple of like, hey, I've already got the map that we can use. You said you want it. Here's the map. You don't have to worry about getting that. Or you use a lot of notebooks. Here's a notebook. Here's a pack of pens that are different colors because I know you want to mark something. Just simple things that you can buy for the DM or just let them have that will make the burden of the financial costs down.
Yeah. Rules. Don't be so hard on the rules. Like, I know there are rules lawyers out there. I'm one of them. But try not to be so hard about the rules and such a stickler. Like, oh, this is rules as written. We don't care about rules as intended, or like, it's wrote this way, so this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, because there's a comma here. That means we have to stop and we have to look at after this. It means this because there's a period or a comma or a semicolon. So these are stop. These are rules, not laws. They are things that they are guidelines for people to act by, not if you do this, you have messed with the system. It's completely fine to disregard rules. It's completely fine to change rules. It's completely fine that you just could forget mid-go.
Please control the meta knowledge that you guys know. Yeah. And like, for instance, there's nothing worse to a DM when combat starts and immediately the player is doing something specifically because they was reading through the monster manual and they know, oh, this creature has vulnerability to cold damage, so I'm doing cold damage right off the bat. And it's like, this is the first time you've ever seen this creature.
Yeah.
Why would you suddenly do cold damage? Like, you haven't thrown a cold spell in 6 sessions.
I've literally had a player at my table grab the monster manual and say, no, that's not what that does. Like, players control that. It's not okay.
Because DMs change this stuff up. It's ways to make things interesting. It's ways to make common monsters more interesting by changing them up, beefing up their hit points, beefing up their AC, increasing their damage,
giving them an item they wouldn't normally have, giving them a will to do something else that they wouldn't normally do, changing the entire way a race would normally act. Orcs aren't evil here; they're good. But a player playing off that meta knowledge would immediately assume, and that would play different. Now, ways that can help is, one, as a DM, you can say, okay, player, you know all of this. Can we incorporate that into your character? Can you, some way, maybe you pick up knowledges like history, so all this lore your character can also know. You're proficient in it. Can you say you know how to cook? Would you like to pick up the cook feat, or maybe the chef feat? Maybe I'll just give it to you. You can start off with a chef feat. It's not going to hurt anything. That way, you can use your knowledge you have actually in the game, and it doesn't detract. It is part of your character, and we don't have to explain it anymore.
Yeah. But sometimes the DMs do things because they don't want you to know. They want you to figure it out. Yeah. Why are the orcs running past the barbarians and the paladins and going straight for the clerics and wizards? And like that's not normal. Like, they don't normally do that. Well, why now? I don't know. Maybe you need to figure it out.
Yeah.
Maybe it's part of their grand scheme.
Yeah.
And they want you to figure that out, not challenge them at the table.
Yeah. Or as a player, you can simply ask the DM, hey, do I know that? Does my character know that? I know that, but does my character know that? You know, before you say it, before you go, this is an absolute, you just say, does my character know? Is there a way I can roll to find that out? You know, that way the DM can give you the green light for your knowledge. You say, yeah, sure, you know.
Yeah. And sometimes the DM wants to do stuff like that also that's so out of the norm to give the players a hint of what's to come.
Yeah. So, yeah, reining in that meta knowledge is helpful.
Yeah. The next thing is allow the PCs to help with prep and lore building.
Yeah. This is as simple as you have a really good artist at your table. The artist, he doesn't really want to run the game, but when you described an NPC that's major, maybe a king or something, hey, could you draw that for me? And then now, yeah, sure, I would love to draw what that king looks like. And then you can use now, this is what you see every time you go meet the king. This is what it is. Or a map. Could draw, if he's a really good artist, he likes to draw that. He might draw the map of the town you're in. You know, you might not have time to draw the map. She's really good at it. She makes fantastic landscape maps. Let her do it. Yeah. And then just say, okay, this is what it is. Because what that does is two things. One, takes the burden off of you to have to come up with it. And two, it makes the players engaged in what they did, because now they have something to say about it.
Yeah, and if a player does help in something, they do typically tend to be more engaged in it.
Yeah. And it could be also, with lore building, you could say, well, there's a monastery of monks up there. Chris, would you like to tell me what the monastery of monks is like up there?
Yeah, take some of that brain burden off of the DM.
Yeah, and let them come up with it. Just run with it. As long as it's not too wild, just, okay, we'll go with it. And that's something they have now built, they now care about inside your campaign. And really all you have to do is just say, okay, and go with it.
And sometimes if a character does make something so crazy, a DM might actually change it to where the character believes it one way, but it's actually another way.
Yeah.
And if you're the player, run with it.
Yeah. Like, oh, you got me.
It's like, no, I saved the princess. You thought she was a princess. She's actually just an actor.
Yeah. Or, it could be even worse. Like, why did you change the way this monastery works? These monks aren't how I explained it. Like, I know. And then they go, oh, what's going on here? And then now you have another thing to delve into. That creates engagement. That creates, a shared communal story that we're all after.
Yeah. And just not challenging your DM on stuff like that, like knowing that, hey, I gave you this information. Mm-hmm. If the DM slightly changes it, it's okay, and there could be a reason for it.
Yeah.
Last thing, do not take this game so seriously.
Yeah, it's a game. The guys at Wizards of Coast have said this. There's plenty of people. Critical Role has said it. There's other YouTubers and stuff. We've all said it. This is a game. We're here to have fun. This is not something you have to take seriously. Just because something happened you didn't like, don't let that ruin the experience. Because the first person to get blowback on is the DM. When people get their feelings hurt at the table, usually the DM is the one who shoulders that burden. And it could be your fault that you did it too. So it's for fun. We are playing this for fun.
Yeah, it's all for fun. We're all here to play together, to tell a story together, to goof off and have fun. So don't take it so seriously. Just have fun with your friends.
Yeah. Allow the jokes to roll. Allow the that rule to be broken. It's like, yeah, it's fine. You know, it's okay that they did something that doesn't make sense. It's fine. We'll explain it later. You know, just roll with it. It's for fun.
Yeah, and I think if people are less serious about it and like aren't harping on the rules so hard, it does lighten it up and make it easier for the DM so that there is less burnout.
Yeah. So we've gone over a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot to this, and there's probably more we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
And as a community, I feel like this is a good video for people to speak up. So, I mean, if you have, you know, something you want to put down in the comments to say, hey, this happened to me, share that.
Yeah, like what was your burnout experience? Because I mean, we've all had it. Or what's something we missed that you think is important for others to know? Write it down in the comments.
Yeah. Also, hit that like, that bell, and share these videos with others. You know, with people you think need to know or watch.
Yep. And if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe.
Yep.
Until then, guys, keep rolling them Nat 27s and have fun with your friends.
Do it behind the thing so you don't have to tell any of your players what you're doing.
That's right. Nat 27s, baby.
Yeah, they just have to accept it.